The Terminator. This is an R-rated action sci-fi movie around 1 hour and 45 minutes long, being released in 1984. The story of this being the Terminator is sent to assassinate young waitress Sarah Connor, whose unborn son will lead humanity to a war against the machines, while human soldier is from the same war sent back to protect her at all costs. Going on to the good points. Now, the good points about this movie is the fact that this movie tackles so many genres is really interesting, really deserves a lot of credit, because it isn't just action and sci-fi. I like the fact that it mixes horror elements into this movie as well, especially, yes, you heard right, horror. Slasher horror is involved in this movie. I think it's, especially for its time, it's really amazingly used and handled, which I have to give a lot of credit to. Now, James Cameron in this movie, really, this is the first movie where, I know he's done other movies, but this is the first movie where he really got his hands on to a story and really put his creativity on the screen. He obviously directed and wrote this movie, which he done a great job with, because this is a franchise which has gone on to be a blockbuster franchise series, which is still loved today. One of the main big points for me about this movie is the world building. Behind the whole robots and the Terminators, the machines, is just completely epic. It builds this world which actually leads us to believing in the end that there can be some other sort of world, because of how convincing they are, because the characters behind it, that we care about these characters and they are really believed in this other world, and we start to believe it too, which is something which is very creative and interesting on how they approach this movie. The story of this movie as a whole is great. A time travel movie which has a Terminator trying to kill someone who basically affects the timeline in the future, and it's just really interesting but so simple. Really it is. I can list it off the top of my head, but also alongside this, the way it sets up the story throughout the movie, it's just great. It feels natural, it doesn't feel forced, especially how Kyle and Sarah meet, the way they meet, how they meet, when they meet and stuff like that really comes together quite natural. And the fact that this movie has barely any dialogue in the first, I'd say, half hour of the movie, really, apart from when Kyle and Sarah meet. Then onwards, the dialogue starts to really come through, but really there wasn't a lot of dialogue throughout the movie, and the way they done it was really well handled. Now, the action within this movie is epic, of course. We get a bunch of great action scenes, some really great explosions, some really great kills for its time, but the fact that it isn't over the top. It's really grounded in the way where we can actually feel it's at least believable or realistic. I love the feel and the tone of this movie. It feels like an 80s movie, which is great, and I love that feel. Alongside the tone, we have a pacing which is completely fast throughout. Even when the characters are talking, most of the times they're talking in a car chase or a car shooting scene or something. Really constantly just builds and builds and builds throughout the whole movie, which keeps us invested and interested in the story. Character building in this movie, I think, was done amazingly, especially when it comes to the relationship between Carl and Sarah, how it led up to really what became their relationship. It's something that really boosts the characters, because their relationship really was something key, because they were the only humans. If you think of a Terminator, he doesn't have emotion, so we can't really get emotionally attached to that guy, and he's the villain. So we have to think of these two as the main humans, and the way they come together, how they feel for each other, how they felt so alone before. Everything just sort of feels like fate between these two, and how they're meant to be, and it just comes together quite nicely. The reveal that Kyle Reese is John Connor's father, I think it really felt amazing. It really was well handled again. But also, I can imagine at that time, if you guys were born around that time and seen the movie around that time, how shocking was it? I can imagine it was one of the most shocking scenes of all time. Technically, this movie is amazing, especially for its time in the 80s. The cinematography for its time was really good. The editing as well was really well cut, especially for a fast-paced movie. The music as well, really great. Some really great score in there, which really matches the tone of the movie as well. But in this movie, we of course have some great performances from the cast. Michael Biehn playing as Kyle Reese. He was one of my favourites. He was so great. He really added an intensity. And the fact that he was going against a Terminator which was double the size really just showed how epic of a character he was, and how much he really cared about Sarah Connor and the future of the human race. Now, Linda Hamilton comes into this as Sarah Connor. She was a great, interesting character as well. First starting off her life feeling quite alone, but really is suffering from a backstory of hers, and really how she really goes throughout the movie, obviously meeting Kyle and then falling in love with him. Obviously at the end of the movie she's pregnant and stuff. Really her story pans out quite well, but her as a performance as Linda Hamilton was really great. I really have to give her a lot of praise. We have Arnold Schwarzenegger obviously coming to this as the Terminator. He, of course, is one of the biggest action stars of all time for sure. This character also really suited him well because he's got quite a few acting flaws. He isn't a great actor, he's just a big action star and has done really well for that genre. But this role really plays into his hands because he hasn't got to say a lot of stuff. He's just got to be big, intimidating, and be a great villain, which he was. Another great thing about this movie is how they handle the purpose of a Terminator. I think this does the best portrayal of that out of the whole franchise. It really is obviously a Terminator's purpose is to complete the mission. That is its only purpose. Whoever the target is, it's going to kill it and it won't stop. It doesn't care, it won't second think it, it's going to kill you whether you like it or not. My favourite scene of the movie has to be where the Terminator is first introduced. He's naked, of course, he's just turned up, he kills these guys in a slasher horror style way. He completely just throws his fists into some guy and just rips him apart. The blood on his hands, it just is so intimidating. It just ultimately kicks ass and just really introduces himself so well. On to the bad points. Yes, there is some bad points about this movie which really do affect it nowadays. First off being the budget of the movie. You can tell it has a low budget, of course, nowadays, which leads on to the second point. They're sort of joint together, the special effects. The budget was so low that the special effects are quite dated in this movie, especially nowadays. I feel like even though the special effects were bad in this movie, it's still better than some of the CGI nowadays. And that's crazy because sometimes they use too much CGI, it looks so unrealistic. Whereas this looked unrealistic to a way where they was doing practical effects and stuff. So I could sort of respect it in that way. Really watching it now, it feels very dated. Especially the scenes where Arnold's prosthetic face and him cutting the eye out and stuff. Some of the things really look dated in an 80s style, which I could sort of still appreciate. So guys, it's rating time. Let's have a look what the critics had to rate this movie. We have IMDb giving it an 8 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes giving it 100%. And Metacritic giving it an 84. My rating for this movie is an 8.5 out of 10. That makes this totally fucking awesome. Guys, overall, this movie is a classic. It sets up a franchise which I've forever loved and will continue to defend, even though through its bad stages it's going into. I just absolutely love it. I saw the original movie, this movie, in the early 2000s, again in my teen years, and I recommend this movie to anybody. It's simply one of the best action, sci-fi, slasher horror movies of all time. So guys, an 8.5 out of 10 for the Terminator. Let me know your ratings and thoughts in the comment section down below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree? My rating and my thoughts? Let me know in that comment section. Guys, don't forget to check out all the other Terminator reviews coming up in the future. Do stay tuned because tomorrow, Terminator 2 Judgment Day review will be up on the channel, which I don't want you guys to miss, as well as the Best of Horror series. I'm reviewing a bunch of horror movies in the Best of Horror YouTube series. I'll leave a link in the description and an annotation at the end of the video for the playlist. I reviewed Halloween, The Shining, The Exorcist, The Witch, and a bunch more, which is coming up as well. So please do go ahead and check that out and support that as well. And also to vote for the next horror review coming up on the channel, I want you guys to head over to my Twitter at jspring94 and let me know one of your favourite horror movies which I haven't reviewed yet in that series, and I'll try and get obviously onto reviewing that, or comment down below if you haven't got Twitter and let me know your favourite horror movies as well. So thank you very much guys for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. I've been me, you've been you. I'll see you next time guys on Talking with Jay Springer.